So today's topic is a little bit controversial. So please, by all means, place in the comments where you stand on this one. So today's topic is about therapists that get too personal or too connected during the therapy sessions. And we may even segue into the client getting too connected as well. But first, we have a question for Justine.
Yeah.
It's a very important question, and it's a life-saving question.
Yes.
This question could change your whole and entire life. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Is it normal or not to use your sleeve to wipe your runny nose?
I can't even remember. I just did it then. I went like that. So probably not.
So not like get your sleeve and.
Oh yeah, no. Yuck. No.
Thank gosh I didn't have a runny nose.
You mean like little kiddies do?
Yeah, they do, and they've got snot all up the wazoos, But as an adult, is that normal?
My kid's grinning at me. Is that because you do it, Melody? Yes. She's got all red and she's grinning.
She's a booger sleeve. Booger, booger, booger.
She's like looking real dodgy.
I admit, when I've got a super runny nose and I'm just at home, working online or something, I've got no issues with shoving a couple of tissues up there and then just walking around the house. None whatsoever. But on the sleeve, no, no. That's
you'd have a shiny sleeve, wouldn't you?
Ew.
Nose is so cold. You'd have like snail marks on your sleeve.
Oh, bro. You know what? If you ever see anyone in the future and you see those snail trails on the sleeve, you can go, you've been in the garden.
Oh.
No, they haven't.
Glistening snot sleeves.
They've been grotty. That's what my grandmother would say. She goes, you've been grotty.
Isn't it funny when you get a moment when someone asks you a question like I just had then, and I'm like, I don't know what I do when my nose is running because I just don't. I do it so like unconsciously.
Yeah,
About what is it that I actually do with,
Many years ago, I went and got my makeup done for a wedding, and the lady couldn't get a patch just here to match up for the rest of the makeup. And she's like, oh, did you get a scar or something there? No. What I've been doing for like years and years and years is every time I'm thinking or I'm nervous, I go like this. And I'd slowly change the pigment on my face just by softly touching it and thinking, and that's what I've done. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So every time I did it from there onwards, I'd be like, oh, no.
Yeah.
No, you're going to put a dent in his face.
What's that saying? Making the unconscious conscious.
Yeah, and John's got a beard at the moment, and he's got this one little bald patch in the same spot. And he's like, why do I get this bald patch? And then he sits there and you see him thinking and he's doing a twizzle in that one spot. And I'm like, it's because you keep twizzling those few hairs in that one spot. They're slowly falling out.
They're probably falling out and then they probably won't come back in that spot, eh?
Exactly. So snail trails on the sleeve, not my thing.
Yeah, no.
No. Okay, and we're all consciously aware of that now. So
everybody look at each other's sleeves.
Yeah, I know.
Listen.
So yes,
old movies where they put their hands out and they check to see if their hands are clean and their nails are clean.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah.
All right. So sharing personal stories when a client comes in. So it doesn't matter whether the clients come in for one session or 10, 20 sessions, whatever it is. What's your approach on that?
It's always unique to the client that you're with.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's there's such a line between how much you can share and how much not to, because what I've found is, and we've had this conversation before, that when you're in a session, it's especially with hypnotherapy, it's a place of authority, and authority is 50% and 50% knowledge. And I can really feel when that authority shifts and it does influence
when you go into more the friend zone instead of the therapist zone.
When you get quite and if you were doing more of a coaching type long-term thing, or there's other kinds of ways or therapy modality, talk therapies, where that authority is not probably needed so much than what we do with hypnotherapy. But for me, it's like when you kind of cross over where you become too familiar, then the authority seems to go, and the sessions, I can just feel when the energy's different, and I have to actually get that authority back.
Yeah, you have to, and it's hard to pull it
just
back.
bring yourself back into that space of being the therapist again. Sometimes I do, like if someone is telling me about experiences that they've had, sometimes I'll give a little bit of an example of, say, if I was teaching a technique, I'll say, well, in the past I've experienced this, and this is how I use this technique to move through it, which I think is quite different to just going, oh, I've been there before, and blah, 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 blah. And they're telling you about a relationship. Oh my God, you should have heard about my relationship. Oh, is it, you know what I mean?
It's not a comparison game. It's not a sharing. Yeah. You share, then I'll share game.
Yeah.
It's complete
relationship we've got.
And it's completely different when it comes to the client, because the client may just want to share, or the client may want to ramble or something. But one thing that does grind my gears, because I've had a lot of therapy in my years, and I probably will have more therapy in the future. But one thing that does grind my gears is when the therapist, is just allowing the client to keep on yabbering on with the personal story.
Yeah.
And when the client will keep going back to that personal story, and you've asked them to stop or pause or wait, so can we just pause on that and we'll come back to it? And they don't want to, and they just keep on pouring out. I've got no issues with, pouring out in that first session, because that's the whole design process of it. But to continue coming back to that story in each other session after that, there's a trigger happening. There's something else going on.
Shift that,
And that's when you've lost the authority. When you say to the client, look, can we pause on that conversation and circle back to it? And they don't pause.
Yeah.
There's no respect there anymore.
We do we do definitely teach a technique where someone goes to get into the story to shift the GT stuff, which shifts them out of that space, and then they generally don't want to even talk about that story anymore, because it's not doesn't have any energy.
Yeah, it doesn't have any energy. But even some therapists, they get so wrapped up in their story as well, and it's as if they need validation to connect to the client.
Yeah. The other thing that's really interesting is, and I'm sure I've had this conversation recently, is the importance that being quite self-aware as a therapist, that you are not putting your story into the client's head, so then they're going to go home carrying your story and worrying about you, and that's really not our place there. And I see that a lot with people that are starting out.
It's common when starting out, because you want to make a connection of some sort, and you think, shit, what tools do I have? You're still learning your hypnosis or your NLP, etc. And the easiest tool is to go into personalized stories. But what many don't realize is, with that personalized story, once that person goes into hypnosis and you're like, close your eyes, imagine, picture, pretend, whatever, the brain has then gone, well, that's the most recent story, so let me play that out. As a perfect example, actually, is yesterday I got triggered by some family stuff, and then last night I had nightmares about my family. I went straight back to my hometown where I was raised. I was driving a car, and I was driving my old very first car, and I knew I was driving the car, and every time I went to the left-hand side of the road, all the cars were coming in the opposite direction. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm on the wrong side of the road. And then all of a sudden I saw my father there, and there were these people there. It's like you know them, but you can't see them. You just know that you know them. And I said to them, I tapped my father on the back, and I said to them,
now,
this is my dad. And they all went, and he continued to ignore me with his back to me. And I was like,
This is your dream or the memory? This was
No,
your
that was the dream.
yeah.
So being triggered or having that personalized story told to me yesterday and then dreaming about that night,
Yeah.
it's a perfect example of how, as a therapist, we could tell a story and then the client does hypnosis, which is a dreamlike state. And then suddenly that client is using your story to sift through.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you've got to be really careful when it comes to those stories because, sure, you're helping your client sift through some stuff, but what impact are you leaving?
Yeah. It's really important. Like when someone comes into our space and they open up and they're vulnerable and they share, we have
Mm.
such a huge responsibility to keep their mind and well to keep them safe. Do you know?
Yeah.
And because even working in the realms of hypnosis, they're putting so much trust into us, and it's we talk about it like when you go into the session, you know, our job is to go into the world of the client and to get
Ask them.
understanding, yeah, understanding about why it is they're doing what they're doing, seeing life through their eyes, so that we can actually offer help or move them through stuff they do it themselves. Um, and if we're sitting there going, oh, that was me, and oh, you know, I've experienced this, and oh yeah, I can, you know what I mean? Are we doing that, or are we just going, me too, me too? Do you know what I mean? Are we
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
space of seeing through the eyes of the client with understanding so that we can help them?
Mm.
Like I said, it is, you know, it is common to see it first, but that's why supervision is good and catching up with students and practicing with each other and getting, because you get past it very quickly. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Because you
Yeah.
start all the time
And
and
if you are that person that segues back to that all the time, perhaps change it up to third person. So
yeah.
rather than, oh, I've had that experience, go with that metaphoric language of many years ago, there was a person that had a similar story to you.
Mm.
Would you mind if I tell you what that story is? And then allow the client to go, yes, because then they're opening up to the story and tell it in a more metaphoric way. So you would change, like, say, if it was you and your husband, and
Yeah.
you would change the husband up to a bear, and you would change yourself up to a hunter or something like that, and then make it in that metaphoric way so that the client isn't going, oh, that's you.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely a fine line, and I think it's one that you really learn with practice. And that's
Mm,
why, like I said, when you're starting out practicing with, you know, people in your class and people that, you know, to start to get that feel to learn to
mm,
become a therapist or to step in, it's almost like you step into a role. It's still you, but
mm.
it's a different way of being, because when you're with your mates and they're telling a story and you're telling a story and you're all like gelling together because of
Yeah,
your
you're
story.
just bouncing off each
It's,
other.
you know, it's a natural thing to do that. Our we show that we understand in our normal world outside of therapy. You'll tell me something and I'm like, oh yeah, I did that too. And this is how
Mm,
we actually show that we get each other.
yeah,
But in the clinic, it's almost, you know, stepping into that therapy space, you're relearning how to, you know, do the
communicate.
how to communicate and how to get your brain to be more focused on, okay, well, what does this person need?
Mm,
But there definitely is. It's very important to learn, like I said, because um, you know, for our job, that having that authority and you'll know that, like, you hypnotize your mates and you get to a point where it's just
mm.
like
It just says the authority doesn't exist
your brain
anymore.
is just like whatever.
Yeah, exactly,
You know what I mean? Because
exactly.
it's too familiar. You know, that's why
And
you don't
when
really work with family and that so much. Yeah, because
and
of the
and when your client is telling that story and then you're relating another story of some sort, you can they can forget about that story and what it was that they were there for as well. So they're no longer open to, alleviating that as such because they're too busy of your story,
mm.
you
Yeah.
know.
So it's a very fine line, and it's one that's learned. And like I
Mm.
said,
It comes with practice.
if you listen to this conversation and you're a bit like, oh, do I do that? Because like sometimes in session you don't remember what you do, and you
Oh,
are just
yep.
out. This is oh, doggy's talking. This is something that it's good to go through with a supervisor or with the person or mentoring, just running it through and going, hey, this is how I am. Do you see this as okay? That's why it's so important. Like we have the supervision with HR.
Sometimes there can be, I mean, I don't know if there's a name for it or not. So if anyone knows the name, let me know. But sometimes also that I listen to a lot of conversations, and all of a sudden the person who's the client as such is grasping on to what the therapist is saying and giving a name to a problem or an identity to it. But there was never a problem there in the first place. They just think there's something wrong with them. And it's like,
yeah,
you might just be that kind of person that wipes your nose on your sleeve. Like,
yeah, yeah.
you know, it's like, hang on. And I understand you're trying to get this connection, this relationship of some sort, but before we went to that conversation, there wasn't a problem.
Yeah,
And now, in those few seconds of moments, you've identified a problem, you have given it identification of its own, and then ownership.
yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah,
Like, huh?
yeah,
I,
yeah.
and that can be such a fickle line to walk on as well, you know. So yeah, when it comes to those personal conversations, just, you know, keep yourself in check. By all means, you want to have those conversations without being too open. Like, you're not going to say to your client, hey, I do that with my period as well, or something like, whoa, line, line, you know. But you know, you want to have like a small amount, but we don't want to give full details,
Yeah, yeah.
you know. And we've got to understand that we're stepping into the world of the client. And whilst that client is having that conversation, before they even start, and you as a therapist, you're shutting the fuck up, you're going to find out so much more about that client than they even know about themselves.
Yeah.
Because you will hear the words that they're using, you will know the stories. The stories will change as more details come to light in their mind, and you can start to weave that fabric of their life.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes there are people out there, and I've probably done it myself, you know, and there are people out there that tell a story, but they're only telling parts of it. But then they add in a couple of things, and you're like, oh, hang on,
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
got it
yeah.
now.
Yeah,
I've got
yeah.
it, but I'm not going to say that to the client. I'm going to use ambiguous language to get them to realize it
Yeah.
without them going, oh, it is that. And I said it wasn't. Oh,
Yeah. So for people listening, yeah, if when you are in session, especially if you're starting out, notice, Trish, notice where, when we were talking about authority before, just notice the energy in the room when you're talking and start to notice where the authority is or whether, do you know what I mean? That where the relationship is, with
yes.
its client therapist and see how it influences the session because it's
Mm.
quite interesting to notice. And like I said, we all do things and there's been times I remember even I think it was maybe even this year where there was one time I was like, oh, I've done it, I've just gone a bit over that line a bit much, but
Yeah,
I
we've
could
all
see
done
that
it.
I had to bring the self back because it will influence actually the how the session goes. It's cool for conversations and stuff, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, so it's definitely an interesting thing that
And you've got
you learn.
time. Like, use the element of time. Will you be that person's friend by the end of the therapy? Who knows? Like, I've had some clients in my room that are fucking amazing people. I've helped them through their crap, and we've got to the end, and we're best mates.
Yeah.
I don't do the friend zone thing until after therapy has finished.
Yeah.
So, no adding me on Facebook. I won't accept gifts, all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
you know. But after that therapy phase has ended, it's kind of like releasing that bird so it can finally fly again. No
Yeah.
worries, you know, hang out, we can go for a drink or whatever, but it stays as therapist in therapy sessions. It
Yeah.
doesn't get continued on.
Yeah.
And that can be a hard line to navigate as well, where people are like, oh, well, I've gotten to know this person. I really know everything about their life. Should you go to that friend zone as such and add them on Facebook or go to a market or whatever with them? And it's like, well, as long as you're not seeing them for any therapy anymore. absolutely.
I have lots of clients that come back, that I've had for years, that come back just for like a tune-up, catch-up
Yeah,
every 3 to 6 months, and
yep.
a lot of the time, they're not even coming back for anything in particular,
Mm.
but a lot of the time,
Just
it's
weed the garden.
not that you're there. Like, they like to know that someone's got their back and they're there, and the connection, you're quite regulated, is good, and it's just like a catch up.
Mm.
I just call it a tune up session. You don't really even do anything, but it's more just I think for people, it's knowing that there's someone that's got my back and there's someone I can go
Have
to.
that mental cleanse.
Yeah.
And any hypnotherapist out there that says, hey, I've done all the work, you've gotten rid of your anxiety. Yeah, sure, they've got rid of anxiety, but you still need an element of anxiety. It's just a different of whether you,
Say there's
yeah, whether you distinguish it as anxiety or excitement, because they're the same thing physically inside your body. It's just the way you react to it. But all these hypnotherapists are like, your anxiety is gone. It's like, yeah, but understand that it can come back. And when you recognize that it's coming back because you're being triggered or whatever, reach out.
yeah. And the other thing I say to people is, like, it's very easy to get the brain to feel safe today, which is it's easy to even to shift shit in the past and to get the brain to realize I'm here today and I'm safe. But does that stop you fucking up in the future?
Exactly.
No, it doesn't. Is it going to stop you getting in a bad relationship? It might make it less likely to.
Less likely.
Feeling safe, but the chance of you having problems down the track
Yep.
is 100% chance that you're going to have shitty times. There's 100% chance that someone might die around you. There's
Life is going to
100%
interrupt life.
exactly. So it's like we work on bringing people back to today and feel safe. But in the future, I guarantee you're going to have shitty times.
Yeah, and you're going to need someone in your corner to help back you up. I heard a story many years ago about a man who had hypnosis to quit smoking, and then he went over to America. There was a horrible accident with him and his motorbike and a few mates and stuff like that. And he instantly, in that moment of trauma, was on the side of the road with a smashed up motorbike, picked up his mate's cigarettes and just started smoking again. Now, did the hypnotherapy fail him? No. Okay, he went through a traumatic,
Yeah.
like life-affirming event where literally he went, fuck, I'm mortal. Life can change at any time.
Yeah.
And he picked up a cigarette as a way of calming his nervous system.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
not a negative moment. It
Yeah.
only becomes a negative moment. Yeah, it only becomes a negative moment when he goes, oh, I've got to stop this and I can't, and because it's going to kill me.
Yeah.
And it's like, no worries. He's like, oh, did the hypnotherapy wear off? No, life changed. Your
That's
brain just
like
went,
too. Like, you do people for weight loss, and they might come back to me 6 months later, and they're starting a bit of the snacking again, and I'll be like, well, kind of what's going on in your life? And then I find out they've gone through a breakup, and I'm like, well, your mind is creating a coping mechanism to help you get through a hard time. Or if someone's suddenly having something bad happen and they're smoking weed again or something, but they're going through a really hard time, and I'm like, just wait till the hard time calms down and then we'll look at it. But for now, your brain is creating coping mechanisms
yeah, it's a
to
coping
get
mechanism.
through a time. And does it mean that stuff's failed and it's all over for the rest of your life? No, it's just and to be able to have awareness of, I'm doing this behavior because I'm going through a hard time right now. Awareness is everything, because then you can have the choice to stop.
And
So it
really
doesn't,
embracing that it is a hard time.
yeah, exactly. We're
Mhm.
allowed to, our mind, or we, have to have coping mechanisms in place.
Hmm.
And if that means, if you've just been fired from your job and you start having a couple of drinks at night and you haven't drunk for ages, but a new job comes along and suddenly you're not doing it anymore, it's just a coping mechanism. It's not a
Hmm.
disease that you've got lifetime, that, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's
And when those coping mechanisms come in, it's recognizing that it's okay to do this for now.
exactly, for now. Yeah.
For now. You have to add the for now in. It's okay to do this for now. So it's like the metaphoric story of building a house. You don't build a house on sand. You can go to the beach, visit, and build that house to just stay there for the night. but you don't permanently build the house on the
Yeah.
sand.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need more solid foundations. And and then there's so much associated guilt with people. Like, I understand they're all supportive and we want what's best for our mates and clients, etc. But then when you say something along the lines of, "Oh, I thought you quit," or "You you never used to drink this much,"
Mm.
that's a real guilt load.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
can't we switch it up to, "Oh, are you okay?"
Exactly. Yeah.
Rather than, there's no judgment in that. I'm not saying, "Are you okay? You're drinking a lot more lately." I don't need to identify. All I need to do is say to that person, "Hey, you okay? Do you need to have a talk?"
Mm.
And it's only when they identify that perhaps the drinking was a problem, because it might not be a problem for them. They gave up, they went back to it, but it's not a problem in this moment. When they gave up, it was a problem back then, but in this moment, it's not. And then I've asked, "Are you okay?" Not identifying anything that I think is out of the ordinary. And if they see it as a problem, they're like, "Oh, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah." Because nobody ever says, "Are you okay?" And then the person says, "No, I'm not okay." What happens is you say, "Are you okay?" And then they will start with the story if they trust you enough
Yeah.
to be with that. Now, if
Yeah.
they don't trust you enough, that's because there's a fear involved. So many people will say, "Oh, I have trust issues." No, sweetheart, you don't have trust issues. You have a fear associated. Not one person has trust issues. What the person has is fear associated with giving you that
Yeah.
information.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is a fear. Now, if that person is opening up to you, it's because they've put that fear aside and now they trust you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But if they don't give you that information, that's because the fear is still in front, like the shield. And then you have to be educated enough to go, "I respect that.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I've just asked, I've just checked in. Are
Yeah.
you okay?"
Yeah. And it's really cool when clients do have that awareness that maybe that behavior that they used to have is just starting to creep up and they reach out.
Mm.
They
Yeah,
reach
that's the difference,
they,
is knowing it's creeping.
yeah, and they just reach out and have a bit of a tune up just to bring it in. Having that self-awareness to be able to know, okay, I'm a bit off balance and I need a bit of support, which is what we're here for,
Mm.
is
And
to
also, as a therapist, is making sure that you're supportive with that. So let's just say you've got a client that's returning for whatever reason, and they've come into the room and they're like, "Hey, I've just, my anxiety is kicking in again." Your response every time needs to be, "Let's sort that shit out." And
exactly.
off you go. You
On
take
a
their hand, you lead the way. You don't, and I've had this happen to me, where the therapist has turned around and gone, "Oh, didn't we deal with that?" Well, yeah, but guess what? Fucking life happened.
yeah, 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 exactly.
I'm using this as a coping skill. I came to you going, "You know what? You're not going to judge me. You're going to help me out." And the first thing out of your mouth when I'm open, putting my fear aside, is, "Didn't we deal with that?"
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Get another therapist, seriously. That therapist should be feeling honored that you've returned to them for, weed the garden, a little bit of maintenance, or, has set the fear aside. "I trust to talk to you." And you should be going, "All right, do we need a shovel to bury this? What do we need to do?
yeah, 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 yeah,
Let's
yeah,
sort this shit out."
yeah, yeah,
They're on your team. They're rooting for you. They're like, "All right, let's go." Not, "Didn't we sort that out?"
yeah, 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 yeah.
You know, like, what the?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Didn't we sort that out? Is that your personal story? Do you feel like a failure now? Am I now the therapist? Kidding me.
Funny.
So yeah. So should you share personal stories in the therapy session?
Mm.
There's a line.
Yeah, there's a
But
line,
and I
and
don't think there's a black and white on it.
no, and it's really to do with just having enough self-awareness in the session that you know that you're there for the client and not
Mm,
going. And if you are going, if you do feel like you're getting triggered and your mind's going popping off to all these things, you go and have sessions yourself, like
mm,
go and do the work on what's being brought up,
mm,
and that won't happen. Like it won't happen, because if you're continually working on yourself too and doing what you need to do, you're less likely to have your brain firing to events that are being triggered by your client. So, and like I said before, this, having supervision and having mentoring is so important, because you can run through to someone and they can say, look, I shared this, or I said this. Do you think this is appropriate to do in a session? So people can learn at the start to
Flow
feel that.
together.
Yeah.
And exactly like you were saying, notice that energy shift in the room when the authority changes.
Yeah.
Because if somebody has shut down because you've just said something, that's processing.
Yeah.
Or if they've started defending and you're listening to the tone, all right, we've got a trigger going on. Now's not the time for personal. Now's the time to, how do I get that fear shield to come out,
like we
the
said,
trust to come in?
Yeah, and sometimes, and why are you sharing the story? Sometimes you can share a story if it's an example for teaching a technique. Like maybe this morning, sharing something like this morning, I did find it really hard to get up and go for a walk this morning. So what I did was I shifted that feeling, and I put myself into the future to realize how I will feel later. And maybe that did happen or not, but that's sharing a story. It could be personal story, but to show
it's achievable.
To show this has happened, and this is how you would deal with it, whether that story is true or not, or you're just using it as a metaphor. Sometimes, sharing some stories with a way of teaching of what processes were taken so the person can get it. That's quite different to someone going, oh, I just went through a breakup. Oh, I just went through a breakup too. Was yours nice? Was yours nice? Or,
hey, girlfriend.
That kind of the friendship conversation, that's
God, go down to the pub, get yourself a mojito. Way cheaper than therapy. No, that's not therapy.
So there's different ways of sharing that. There's a different energy there, eh? There's the more friendship energy to the therapist energy.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've got any questions, or you have any thoughts about that, please place it down in the comments below, because we'd love to have that open-minded conversation. Like, how does it work for you? What it is that you do? I love that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right, lovelies. We'll see everybody in a fortnight. Okay. Oh wait, I gotta pull mine down.
Be like the wet socks, Trish. I have to hang those way in the back of your plant.
Like the snail trail across the face, like you're going into war. It's a war paint. See you, everybody. Bye-bye.